Our topic tonight is winter weather, or the other topic, other title is How to Fly Like a Viking. I don't know. Okay, I guess we've got some Wisconsin people here. How to fly like a packer, or maybe a bear, or something like that. But I'm doing part of the presentation, and my good friend and colleague Joe Siegel will be also presenting here shortly. A little bit about myself, and then I'll let Joel talk. I'm a retired professor of atmospheric sciences. I also actually was a professor, assistant professor in aviation at one time at the University of North Dakota. Also, I did flying research, icing, microburst, wind shear type studies with our research jet at the University of North Dakota. Also, I worked with the University of Wyoming King Air for a period of time. And I got to fly as a scientist, and also in the jet, I got to fly right seat, of course, as a required crew member. In my former life, I was a Part 135 pilot. I flew canceled checks across the state of Wyoming and other things. Also, I'm a flight instructor. I've got quite a bit of flight time. This is actually back in the 80s, I was a flight instructor. Right now, I'm a part owner in a Mooney M20J. Try and fly 10 hours, 5 to 10 hours a month on my own dime, but also I am a Civil Air Patrol volunteer. And I have a YouTube channel on aviation weather. So if you're interested in aviation weather, go out there and check that out. Um, and I will let Joel introduce himself.
Perfect. Thanks, Fred. And for the record, I think that you need to upgrade that YouTube channel to a new TikTok channel. Just you can be the new aviation weather star. So, for those on the call who don't know me, I've seen some very familiar names in the attendees list. So, thank you all for coming. I'm a meteorologist with the FAA now. Along the way, I did work as an aircraft dispatcher. I was a consultant in downtown DC for 5 years as well. I'm an instrument rated private pilot, and I did happen to see that my DPE who got me my instrument is on this call. So if I say anything bad, it's too late. You did the sign off in 2020. Um, but I am also an active volunteer with Civil Air Patrol. I love doing orientation flights. I love doing transport mission pilot activities with them. It's a ton of fun. And as Fred mentioned, I am a UND alum as well. I actually was Fred's TA back in 2009. Currently work and live down here in Oklahoma City for about the last month and a half now. And looking forward to teaching everybody about some winter weather tools here in the middle of the presentation.
Great. Thank you, Joel. And I should mention that I'm in North Dakota, Grand Forks, North Dakota, where the temperatures are actually warming up here nicely. We've got a good push of warm air. So here we are talking about winter weather. But just to give you a heads up where we're heading with this, we're going to start out talking about National Weather Service advisories. So one of our objectives is how to use those advisories for cold weather planning in your pre-flight. And then also, Joel's going to talk about weather observations and forecasts. So you'll learn how to interpret your weather information and how to assess your probability of icing or hazardous winter weather. Also, starting an airplane in the cold is a pretty dicey situation sometimes. So we're going to go through some of those hazards, talk about those hazards, cold weather starting, and also pre-flighting. And then finally, we're going to talk about operational hazards while you're flying in cold weather. First, we're going to start out with the flight planning. And the first thing I want to do is, I think this is either Troy, Jörg, or maybe Laura or somebody. We've got a question here, a poll. And the first poll question is, what weather resources do you primarily use for flight planning? And I always like to throw this out there to see what people use for their flight planning. So do you use ForeFlight or Garmin or some type of electronic flight bag? Do you use 1-800-WX Brief, the Aviation Weather Center, or other? So you can go ahead and make that selection now.
Yep, you can see, Fred, I launched the poll. What weather resource do you use for flight? 1-800 Weather Brief, online or phone, Aviation Weather Channel Center, or other. And I'm going to let those numbers roll in for a minute, and I will end this poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. and I'm going to share the results with you guys. 53% are ForeFlight people, 25% 1-800 Weather Brief, 13% Aviation Weather Center, and 9% are other.
Wow. So it looks like most people use an electronic flight bag then. Okay. So with that in mind, let's move into our topics. And the first one will be the National Weather Service advisories. After that, we're going to jump into cold temperatures and a little bit discussion of that. Joel's going to talk about winter weather planning, flight tools, and then finally we'll wrap up this section on destination field conditions. So the National Weather Service has three different categories, general categories. That's advisory, watch, or warning. And you can think of that as kind of like a green light, yellow light, red light, where the advisory is giving you a heads up saying, hey, something's going to happen. I highlighted here, it says less serious weather conditions that may not cause immediate threat to life or property. The yellow light is a watch, and this is where it may create conditions that are harmful to life and property. It's possible, but not a certainty. And usually they put that out well in advance to give you a heads up that something might happen. And then finally, the red light is the warning. And this is where a threat to life and property is imminent. It means that something is happening right now, it's headed your way, and you should take action. So the Weather Service has several different advisories and warnings. We're just going to talk about four of those. I don't want to put you to sleep. And they changed these recently, actually last fall, the fall of 2024, the winter/fall of 2024. And that is the cold weather advisory, the extreme cold watch or warning. Those used to be the wind chill advisory and wind chill watch and warning, but they wanted to be a little bit more specific as far as what they're advising people. And then you have a snow squall warning, which I don't think a lot of people know about. And if you live here in the upper Midwest, you probably know about blizzard warnings. So we're going to talk about those. The first thing is the cold weather advisory. This is, it takes not only the temperature, but also the wind. So in effect, it's either the cold air temperature or the wind chill temperature. They kind of combine those together and put out a cold weather advisory when they expect weather conditions to, cool off, and when you expect cold temperatures or dangerous wind chills. And it actually varies depending upon your location. I have this graphic here that shows the upper Midwest, Grand Forks or the Grand Forks Weather Service, the Duluth, and also out in Bismarck. You can see that if the temperature or the wind chill is expected to be minus 30 or below, they will put out this advisory. However, if you're in Georgia or in South Carolina, of course, and Joel is from Georgia, he grew up in Georgia, and the temperatures down there, they'll put out a cold weather advisory, are a little bit warmer than they are up here. If you look at northern Georgia, it's -4 to +5. Cold weather advisory in the northern Florida is 11 to -20. As a matter of fact, I think they had some cold temperatures down there this week. I saw that there was a freeze warning for northern Florida in that region. The extreme cold weather watch or warning comes out when the temperatures or wind chills expected to be much colder. And here in the upper Midwest, it's -40 or colder, wind chill or the air temperature itself. You can see as you go south, the limit or the criteria is warmer. But if you go to the far south, if you go down to Georgia, the extreme cold watch or warning is -5 in northern Georgia and 10 degrees, +10 in Florida and southern Georgia also. So it varies based on the region. Of course, people are used to, not such cold temperatures down there. I guess if it ever got down to -30 in Georgia, bad things would happen. They did in Texas a few years ago. It got down to single digits. The blizzard warning comes out when they have strong winds, either sustained or frequent gusts that are more than 35 miles an hour, and you have snow, whether it be falling or blowing snow, may not necessarily be snowing. The snow may be moving sideways, blowing snow, And that needs to reduce visibility to less than 1/4 of a mile for at least 3 hours. And sometimes the forecasters don't go right with 3 hours. If they see it's going to be for an extended period of time, they'll pull the gun and put out a blizzard warning. And you'll see that at your local National Weather Service office. If they put out a blizzard warning, you should heed that warning. This is a picture of interstate, what it looks like when there's a blizzard here in North Dakota. I got videos, but I didn't want to really pain you with that. And then finally, this is something rather new. It's a snow squall warning. It's been around for a few years. Snow squalls are when you have a really intense burst of snow and strong winds that cause whiteouts for perhaps maybe a short period of time. And I've got a little video from the University of North Dakota Skycam, which looks out to the west over the airport. And I'm going to go ahead and play this, and I'll forward it to about, whoops, didn't mean to do that. Well, okay. I was going to forward it to about 15 seconds. I'll play about maybe 10, 15 seconds of this, and you'll see the visibility drop significantly in a short period of time. These are horizontal roll vortices, convective vortices. They kind of line up with the wind and they move. And each time one rolls over the airport, the visibility will drop significantly. And I've had friends that have had accidents in these flying VFR. They can sneak in if you aren't anticipating it. So check the National Weather Service advisories to see if a snow squall warning has been issued for your area. Winter weather, of course, we got to talk about wind chill, and everybody should have a wind chill chart close at hand, either in your flight planning, paperwork, especially if you fly in the Northland, because of course your exposed skin will be, can freeze rapidly depending upon the wind chill. And here's a wind chill chart that shows temperature in degrees Fahrenheit along the top and the miles per hour of the wind along the side. And just for an example, if you look at a temperature of 0 and you have a wind of about 15 knots or 15 miles per hour, that would give you a wind chill of -19. And in that blue colored area, that tells you that your frostbite times are about 30 minutes. So of course, as you get stronger winds and colder temperatures, your wind chills drop significantly. And when you have a wind chill of about -55 to -60, exposed flesh can freeze in 5 minutes or about 5 minutes. So that's something to be mindful of. We have some standards here in the Northland. This is University of North Dakota is a huge flight training facility, and they have standards in their operations that when the temperatures get cold, we need to have some sort of criteria whether we can fly or not. And here's some of the standards for the University of North Dakota: -10 degrees Fahrenheit or a wind chill of -21. If it's colder than that, then it's dual only. But then when the temperature drops to below -25 or the wind chill is -36, then it's no fly. And with the Civil Air Patrol, they also have a flight risk assessment tool that we use. We do an ORM. And one of the questions is temperature. If the temperature is -10 or colder, then we have to get special approval for our launch or our dispatch of the aircraft. So that gives you an idea of, really cold temperatures, -10. I don't know if you've ever flown at -10, but definitely -25. That's when things get pretty rough. So make sure you dress for the conditions, of course, and dress in layers. I guess, your mom tells you that. Well, now your flight instructor tells you that, and also your assistant professor, or your associate professor is telling you that now. Joel, this is your items. So would you want to go ahead and speak to this?
Sure. Thanks, Fred. So essentially, Fred just spent a few minutes talking about all of the dangers of the cold in terms of on the human body. And so you've got to prep yourself. before you even think about heading out to the hangar or to the tie down to even pop in your airplane. So we'll talk about how this impacts the airplane, the area in just a few minutes here. But let's talk about where you can actually find all of these kinds of products, both on the observation side and on the forecast side. So let's go ahead through some observations here, if you wouldn't mind clicking through, Fred. So I've got a picture here of an ASOS, your surface observations. They can help us kind of see what's going on. Next, we've got just a little pitot tube on the side of the wing, just to remind you that you've got some instruments on the airplane that may be able to help you out as well to determine whether or not you're going to enter into any kind of winter weather. And then the next slide is for those of you who don't use the Aviation Weather Center for pre-flight, I may start to kind of sway you that direction just for really good overall situational awareness. It's really good to kind of just see on a computer screen of all of the surrounding stations and a nice pretty plot. You can put radar on top of it. It's a little bit easier in my opinion. On the other side, we've got forecasts. We can do some model data. You can kind of take a graphical depiction of where that snow is going to be. We can do some model skew-T diagrams, figure out where that freezing level is. Are we going to hit an inversion? And then, of course, again, back to Aviation Weather Center, where we can actually graphically produce the icing forecast, where we've got the forecast icing product, FIP. And then we've also got the current icing product, CIP, also known as FIP and SIP. You can also overlay your GAirmets and SIGMETs on top of that. If we go to the next slide, for those of you who have been in enough of my webinars, I like to split things up, observations versus forecasts. I do that on purpose just because sometimes it is really important to understand what you're looking at, because a lot of people, a lot of companies like to kind of zhuzh up their products, and what they'll do is they'll take their radar image and they'll manipulate it and move it into the future, but they won't really be clear about whether that's an observation or a forecast. It looks like radar, but is it current or is it future? And then if it's current, is there a delay to it, et cetera, et cetera. So number one for observations is, are you going to be encountering snow, any kind of frozen precipitation along your flight path, either at your departure, en route, or arrival? Radar. It's still a go-to. We like it so much that we've invested a ton of money amongst DoD, FAA, and NOAA for a Radar Next program, which is going to be a ton of fun. Cannot wait. Have no idea when that's going to happen, but it's going to be a fun time. Again, observations, taking a look at aviation weather or ForeFlight, looking at all the surface obs. Do you see any of those little stars? Do you see anything that's showing that it's snowing? Do you see any kind of freezing information in there, freezing drizzle? Do you see any current icing information in terms of PIREPs? That kind of information can be vital, especially as you start looking at more of a day of kind of flight plan as you start getting ready to head out to the hangar. And then next up, I think we've got, yes, the local National Weather Service. So in terms of your extreme cold warnings, I can't remember if they are actually showing them, the National Weather Service warnings in ForeFlight anywhere right now. But if you go to weather.gov, just that homepage, you've got an entire picture of the National Airspace System, the contiguous United States, Alaska, and Hawaii. And if you see some colors around the spot that you're flying, it's always a good idea to click in there and see what those colors mean, whether they're yellow or red for convective season, for a tornado watch, tornado warning, right? We don't want to put multi-million-dollar pieces of equipment in front of the path of a tornado. To now we've got winter weather advisories up there in the New York area this time of year. And then next, please. And then, of course, for some observations, yes, SIGMETs and AirMets do have a forecast element to them, but they can also be used to kind of see how do they line up with the PIREPs, so it kind of gives you a good validation feeling. So if you've got a GAirmet up and you've got a ton of AirMets that are matching up with that AirMet, you can be pretty certain that that forecast is spot on for that day. And then, of course, don't forget to use what's in the airplane. One of my favorite stories is on my private pilot check ride. I put on the autopilot, and the DPE looks at me and says, "Why'd you do that?" I said, "Because it's in the airplane." He says, good answer. And then he says, your autopilot's in up for the rest of the flight, and, flips it off. But you got to use what's in the airplane. Remember, a lot of the advanced avionics have outside air temperatures now. You can take a look at that. I've been in a situation with a dear friend of mine in a 182 where we got caught in a not so fun situation where we started watching our OAT climb from 5 down to 0, down to -2, and we're in visible moisture. Not a fun time to be in. But we had that situation. What helped was having that situational awareness to know where we were, what we were doing, and being able to watch the outside air temperature as it ticked down. So we knew what we were getting into, and we knew how to get out of that situation on the other side. You can look at winds. Some of the advanced avionics come with StormScope or some sort of a Sirius XM. ADS-BN comes with a certain weather layer to it. Use the information that's available to you, especially if you get stuck. Know what is available to you in your flight deck. And then next up, I think we hit up to forecasts. So those are all of the ones where you can kind of look at it, then go out to the airplane if you're still feeling comfortable. These are where I would start kind of, looking into the future, a few days out. What can I expect for maybe a cross country or a local flight? Remember, NOAA prog charts, those are available in ForeFlight. They're also available from NOAA. If you just go on to NOAA, do a Google search for NOAA prog charts or NOAA surface charts, these kinds of things will pop up. Blue, snow. Right? We make it very easy for the pilot community to understand what they're looking at here. And if you forget, it's over on the lower left-hand side. So the NOAA prog charts are a great spot. I believe they go out to about 5 days into the future, I believe, if not a little bit further. So that's a great spot to start just a few days before you start looking at your flight. And then next up, of course, we've got NOAA winter weather, because sometimes you just want to see where the snow is. And there's an option for that. On the exact same page that the prog chart was, on the top, there's a little option that says Winter WX. So if you select that and then select the day, you can actually see where the winter weather forecast is, and the probability of snowfall greater than 4 inches is on the left there. If you're flying into some place where maybe you're looking at that 1 to 2 inch snow, the prog chart may be better, or looking at a forecast from the local weather forecast office is also an option for you. Then we've got the weather models. And again, if you've ever sat through one of Joel's weather talks, I'm very big on taking weather models with a grain of salt, right? Especially in the wintertime, certain weather models have a moisture bias to them, and they go all doom and gloom, where all of a sudden you'll see, 32 inches of snow in one model and 7.2 inches in another model, and another model has completely dry conditions. So snow is very difficult to forecast, but if you see a trend, that's what I always tell people with the weather models. If it's trending up, if it's trending down, if it's maintaining its consistency throughout each model run, it's really good information to kind of give you that situational awareness of, maybe I want to look at postponing this trip this weekend and look at going next weekend instead. And then, of course, again, your local weather forecasting office. That's what WFO stands for. These are the 122 local National Weather Service offices across the United States. They all have a winter, well, I shouldn't say all. I don't know that Albuquerque, New Mexico does. But I know that a lot of the weather offices are now getting a winter weather page where they come out with forecasts like this, where it's like, here's where we're kind of expecting our accumulation to be. Here's timing on certain events. So maybe you can get in beforehand, park yourself in a hangar and be completely and totally fine with it. But it gives you like the 1 in 10. What happens if just everything aligns, all the holes in the Swiss cheese align, you get the maximum amount of snow, and then what's the realistic expectation, that 90% solution. So I highly recommend that you go to the weather.gov office, click on your area, and then at the bottom of that page right there is that winter weather briefing page. So all of these are phenomenal ways for you to actually get a forecast, to understand what you're going to be dealing with on the ground. So if we head to the next slide, we're going to hit something very quickly. I could probably spend an entire class, and in fact, when I was Fred's TA up at UND way back in the day, I did teach an entire class on SKUTs. So SKUT diagrams are a phenomenal tool. This one I pulled from the high resolution rapid refresh to kind of give an example. Sometimes descending when you get caught in a precarious situation like icing, descending isn't always the best option for you. Inversions can be absolutely deadly if you don't know that you've passed through one or that one exists. Highly recommend you take a look at the forecast soundings and even the observed soundings from the either aircraft or from the weather balloons that go up to make sure that you don't have any inversions as you're flying through, because it's vital to know whether or not you actually need to climb into the warmer air or descend into the warmer air to shed some of that icing off. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Fred, and I see we get some questions here, so I'll spend some time answering.
Okay. Thank you, Joel. Thanks for that discussion. We're going to move on and talk a little bit about the destination fuel conditions. We're still in our flight planning section here. And of course, before you depart or before you land, you need to know what the airport's like, what the runways are like. So that's where you can go out and pull up the NOTAMs for a particular location. They'll give you the braking action, of course. That's a whole nother discussion in detail. You can go out to the FAA website and you'll find PowerPoint presentations, videos on braking action, and also field condition. But they're out there. You should know how to read them and understand them. Some smaller airports like this one right here, Gwinner in North Dakota, Gwinner, North Dakota, doesn't really provide a lot of NOTAMs, or they may not get out in a timely manner. So if you go out to the chart supplement, in the chart supplement, it actually says here, confirm weather conditions and runway 1634 snow removal. Call this phone number. So they give you phone numbers to call, and that way you can find out what the field conditions are like. And then I have a friend also that flies air ambulance, and he says that when he goes out at 2 o'clock in the morning, sometimes it's hard to get the airport manager at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So he actually calls local authorities. He calls the sheriff. It's an emergency situation. He needs to get to that airport and land and pick up the passengers. So he'll call the local authorities, whether it be a sheriff or municipal police, and have them go out and inspect the runway and check and get back to him. But you got to do this before you depart. It's a little bit difficult to call in midair and find out what the field conditions are like. Okay, we're going to move on to pre-flight. And before we get to pre-flight, I want to make sure that you're not sleeping through this presentation like my students have done in past years. So the question here, and I'll have Laura bring this up, what's the coldest you've ever flown? Now, this is the surface condition, of course, the surface air condition. If you get up in the atmosphere, even in the summertime, you'll see temperatures of minus 50, minus 40. But how about at the surface? What is the coldest temperature you ever launched in? And I give you a range of temperatures there. I'm not going to read them all. So, Laura, you got it up, I see.
Yes, I have it up, so we'll let those numbers come rolling in. Those are some pretty cold temperatures there you got, Fred.
Personally, the coldest I've been is I had a student up at minus 25, and we almost got called back because, of course, UND recommendations and standards. But I'm just kind of curious what people have flown in.
Well, I'm going to end this poll and let everyone know in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And here's our results.
I was wondering about the 30 degrees Fahrenheit or warmer. How many people don't fly when it's cold? But yeah, there are some people out there minus 20, minus 10, minus 1. But it looks like kind of a smattering. It doesn't really bunch in one area, but it does get kind of scarce when you get down to minus 10 and minus 20. And not a lot of people want to fly when it's that cold, right?
Well, we have a comment from an attendee in the question box saying for him, minus 40 as a U.S. Air Force navigator.
Oh my gosh, that is cold. That's
That's
the
cold.
That's the coldest we had here at Grand Forks. We had minus 43 here at Grand Forks. And they didn't shut down UND. They actually kept the university open. So I took my class outside. It was a physical meteorology class, and we had class outside. Okay, so let's move on. Let's talk about the pre-flight. Some of these things are pretty obvious. You've probably seen these before, but I want to make sure that I'm pretty comprehensive. The first thing, of course, is the clean aircraft concept. You need to make sure that your aircraft does not have ice or snow on it. Sometimes when it gets really cold, you can have dry snow. The dry snow will just fall on the aircraft, and you'll have a very thin layer of snow, maybe an inch or less than an inch of snow. And you can usually brush that off and then inspect the skin to make sure, the wing and the control surfaces to make sure nothing is adhering. But if it's wet snow, then you probably should de-ice the aircraft. You have to inspect to see if that wet snow is freezing on the wing. But brushing it off is allowed if it's dry snow and not adhering. And then finally, it's really nice to have a heated hangar. I tell you, I flew a Cessna 150. I took it down. My daughter was working on her private, and I had to take it down to Kansas in the middle of February, and it was, I think, -10 out. And I had a portable preheat, and I didn't want to be on the ramp at -10, so I had him put in the hangar, and I could do the pre-flight in the hangar, and then hop in the airplane and have them pull me out on the ramp and start it right up. And I tell you, it started on the first shot, so that's pretty good. That's a good trick. Other things to be mindful of when you're walking around the airplane, taking a look at doing your pre-flight basically, is the fuel vents. Any kind of port that's open to the airflow you need to make sure that it's not clogged with snow. And then also when it gets really cold, all those plastic parts on the airplane get brittle. So you need to be very careful when you're bumping against some of these plastic items. Static wicks, especially, will break off very easily if you bump into them. So make sure that you're walking around your aircraft very carefully, inspecting it carefully, making sure that it's clear. There's no ports, the static ports are clear, the fuel vents are open. Oil breather. Here at UND, we had an airplane one time that it was a twin, lost an engine because an oil breather got clogged in flight. They were flying from Winnipeg down to Grand Forks, and he had to land in Pembina, and that was years ago. Other things to inspect when you're walking around the airplane, the tires. I got it from a friend up in Alaska saying that tires will actually spin if is frost in between the rim and the actual tire. So what happens is if you have frost between the tire and the rim, of course, the tire and the tube will rotate, and that'll shear off or damage the stem, where you've put air into the tire. So take extra time looking at the tires to make sure that they're in good condition. The other thing also, of course, is when it gets cold, of course, tire pressure goes down, so you might have to put some air into the tires. Also, oil quantity, of course, the viscosity. When you pull out your dipstick, take a look at the viscosity. If you preheated your aircraft, does that oil flow easily? If it's gelled, then you probably might have to preheat more. And I know that they have multi-viscosity oils now that are more that flow more easily at much colder temperatures. So be mindful of that also. Another thing that I found out from flying up in Alaska is that you should sump your fuel before every flight. Of course, if you have water in the tanks, it'll freeze and it will block the fuel flow into the engine. So make sure when it's warmer and in a hangar that you can get that water out of the aircraft. Cycle your fuel selector. It's really a bad time to find out your fuel selector is frozen in one position when you're airborne and you've got to fly over Lake Michigan or something like that. So cycle a fuel selector when you start up or when you walk around to make sure you can flow off of both tanks or however many tanks you have. And then other aircraft, some aircraft, especially here in the Northland, we have ways of restricting the airflow into the engine and also over the oil cooler. So with These are pictures from Piper. I think the one on the left actually is Civil Air Patrol, so that's the Cessna 172. There are plates that you put in front of the oil cooler to block the flow so that air is not flowing through the oil cooler. The Cessna 182 and also the 172 has a winterization kit that blocks the airflow into the engine inlet. They call them bug eyes, I guess, because they look like bug eyes, but those are very helpful too to keep the engine warm. Other things to be mindful of and is ramp hazards. These are pictures in front of my old hangar. And they didn't do a very good job of cleaning out in front. I'd have to shovel that out myself quite frequently. But when you get a good amount of snow, blowing snow, it'll of course blow up against your hangar. Be mindful when you're pulling the airplane out because if you have ice on the approach and also the taxiway, that airplane, my airplane weighs about 2,700 pounds, the Mooney. And if there's ice underneath my feet, there are many times when I've went down on my backside, and thankfully I've got good cushioning there. But it does hurt. So you have to be mindful pulling that airplane out, looking for ice. One thing that I use sometimes is those they call them Surefoots, or they have spikes that you can put on your shoes. They're rubber. I don't know if you've ever seen those, but they sell them at Walmart and Target and other places. Also, be mindful of snow on the roof. When you open up your hangar, it might come sliding down. Also, as you taxi, take a look at your wings. Those snow piles sometimes pile up, and some of the airport personnel are not really that sharp to keep the snow low enough that you can taxi over, or your wings can go over those snow piles. So that's something to be mindful of. And the other thing also is when you're out on the ramp and the wind's blowing and it's zero, you've got pretty good wind chill, so you typically have an abbreviated pre-flight inspection. Don't do that. Spend time going through all of the things that we've talked about looking at your airplane. As far as preheating, when the temperatures get cold, you need to preheat that airplane. You know that, of course, the airplane engine is made of different types of metal, steel, and aluminum, and they contract and expand at different rates. So as a result, you get slop or maybe even a tighter, clearance between two types of metal, whether it be the pistons or the crankshaft. So it makes sense to pre-flight or to preheat the airplane. Lycoming recommends preheating at temperatures below 32, and it's required at temperatures below 10. And Continental says below 20 degrees Fahrenheit, you should preheat. But I've read quite a bit, Tanis and other people, Mike Bush, and they talk about, keeping the engine temperature at least above 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So preheat it, and also an engine blanket so that when you preheat it, you can keep it warm. When I flew in Alaska, I had a friend who had a Tanis heater, a plug-in heater for his, I think he had a Cessna 185. And we flew out into the backcountry, and I was wondering how he's going to keep the engine warm. And sure enough, he brought a generator, a small Honda generator in the back of the airplane so he can plug in his airplane to keep it warm while we walked for a $100 hamburger in Talkeetna. So be mindful of that. Blankets are good. They'll keep the engine warm for another 2 or 3 hours so that you can start the airplane if you don't have a way of plugging that in. Also, make sure that you preheat the cabin. If with our airplane, we have a little space heater that we have in our airplane. We turn it on 3 or 4 hours before we fly so that the cabin is nice and heated so it's comfortable. The plastic won't break because it's brittle at very cold temperatures. And then also, when you have a nice warm cabin, the avionics and your gyros are very happy. Here's a picture of a forced air preheat. You can see they have, it looks like some sort of NIPCO or some sort of Mr. Heat. And also, this is one way of heating it. Another way I think we're going to talk about is the electric. I probably should have had these pictures on another slide. So that brings us to starting the airplane and preheating. And the question I have for you, if you have or if you rent an airplane, how do you preheat your airplane or your rental during the winter time? Is it with electrical like a Tanis? Is it forced hot air, heated hanger, or other? So I'll let Laura go ahead and take that poll.
So I've got that poll launched for you guys and see what you all think. I'm kind of spoiled. I have a heated hanger and I have a Tanis if I want to use it. So yeah, I'm kind of spoiled, I admit.
Oh, that is so nice. Do you also heat your cabin?
Yes,
Oh,
I
well,
do.
I guess it, yeah,
I
I'm
have
sorry.
one of the Tanis cabin preheaters, which is really, really nice. And then my mechanic has rigged it so that I have a plug on the outside of the plane. I plug it in, it turns all that on and warms it up. But then I have to get through the pile of snow to get in my hangar, and it looks just like your pile, Fred. So there you go. Um, I'm going to end this poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And here's our results. 43% Tanis, 18% forced hot air, 25% spoiled people like me, and 15% are other.
Yeah, the Tanuses are really popular, especially if you don't have a heated hangar. So, okay. Let's move on. We're going to talk about starting the airplane. We'll talk about problems that you have with the battery, also problems with priming, and then also starter cycle. So first, let's do the battery. Of course, it's important to keep the battery charged. A fully depleted battery will freeze pretty close to 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Don't ask me how I know that. But if it's fully charged, though, the temperature at which it will freeze is much colder. Down, Gil says minus 76 degrees Fahrenheit. I've never experienced that, but I have had a battery freeze and it was depleted. Of course, it's nice to have the battery in someplace warm. If you have a heated hangar, of course, it's warm. If you don't have a heated hangar, then you should think of some way of getting heat back to that battery. Otherwise, they also sell little electrical blankets that you can put around your battery to increase the temperature of the battery. Because, of course, a warm battery will crank much easier, crank that starter. So that's preheat. Minimize electrical loads. You don't want all your lights and bells and whistles on because that'll be draining the battery and you want everything going towards the starter. As far as priming, these pictures came from a priming accident, and I've got a number. If you go out to the NTSB and also other sites on the web, you'll find that there are a lot of there's a lot of accidents that are caused by priming during the wintertime. This one actually happened in Eau Claire, I think in 2022. But you got to get that airplane started on the first crank. If you don't, then if you don't get it started on the first try, there is a probability, a high probability that the spark plugs will become frosted over and it'll feel like it wants to start, but it doesn't. So you keep pushing fuel into the engine to prime it, and you can over prime the engine. That leads to an engine fire. And I've even seen fuel puddles underneath engines, and that's when it's really dangerous. You should know the emergency procedures for these are actually memory items for your engine fire on start. Of course, continue cranking, open the throttle, close the mixture. Most people know that. They actually did this with this accident. They went through their emergency procedures. The person that did this had about a 7,000 hours. So they're experienced, but you keep thinking it's going to crank, it's going to crank, it's hitting once or twice, and you keep priming it, and pretty soon you have a fire. So you have to resist that urge. As far as starter cycles, I only pulled the information from SkyTech. SkyTech is pretty ubiquitous now. A lot of people have SkyTech starters, but there are a lot of different types of SkyTech starters and a lot of different types of starters. So, general rule of thumb is to crank the engine on start for 10 seconds. That's a lot. And then they say, depending upon the type of starter, you should let it rest either 20 or 60 seconds or something in between that and then do no more than 3 to 20 starts. 20, I saw that and I was really surprised. I usually don't do more than 3 or 4. If it's not going to crank, then I'll put it in a hanger and heat it up. And then, of course, you should have quite a bit of time between cranks. It says here 10 to 30 minutes to cool down after those 3 or those 20 start attempts. So I put a link here. You can go out and check with your airplane and your starter, see what SkyTech recommends as far as a starter cycle. But you should know that. As far as operational hazards, carbon monoxide poisoning happens, of course, more frequently in the wintertime than in the summertime. Results from faulty exhaust systems. Make sure that you have your during pre your annual and also 100-hour that they inspect it very carefully. The your exhaust system and your muffler shroud. The symptoms for carbon monoxide poisoning are headache, dizziness, and confusion. Prevention, of course, CO2, CO detector. You can get these pretty cheaply from ASA or other places. Supplemental oxygen. We fly with our Mooney with oxygen because we go up to higher altitudes, so it's nice to have that bottle in the back. Of course, do a thorough pre-flight. That means whatever you can see. That might mean the exhaust pipe coming through the cowling, making sure that it is actually extending out from the cowling. And then also make sure that you have an emergency plan if you do start to feel some of the symptoms of carbon monoxide poisoning. As far as winter survival, you should carry during the winter time when it's cold some of these items, a space blanket, sleeping bag. I remember one time I flew up to Churchill to see the polar bears, and my wife was in the back of my Piper Comanche, and she was so cold going up because that the heater wasn't really providing a lot of cabin heat that she broke out the sleeping bag and crawled into it in the airplane. Other things you should have waterproof fire starters. Hand warmers are nice in case you land someplace or even on the ramp, just have them handy. Food and water, and then also extra coats. And make sure you do go out to the airplane with boots. If you're not wearing them, make sure that you have them at least someplace handy in case you're forced down and have to walk. And then finally, on descent, make sure that you plan your descent. You don't want to chop that throttle and then push the nose over because your oil and cylinder head temperatures will just dive. You want to make sure that you descend with power so that you can keep the engine warm and reduce that power, of course, gradually, and also manage your cowl flaps. Typically, here in North Dakota with our Mooney, we don't really open our cowl flaps. We just look at the cylinder head temperatures and figure out from there what we need. But usually in the wintertime, it doesn't require us to open the cowl flaps at all. So that is our presentation on cold weather. You've probably seen some of these things before. We didn't go into great depth on each one, but it's just kind of a reminder of the things that you need to do during the winter time to fly safe and keep safe.